Welcome to the AlphaWarrior Show. We're excited to share diverse perspectives and expert insights with you. Please note that the views and information expressed by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of the AlphaWarrior Show, its management, or our partners. Each of our affiliates and sponsors and partnerships is a separate entity, and their opinions are their own. Today's content is provided for information and educational purposes and should not be taken as specific advice, whether it be financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your specific situation. We provide all information as is and encourage you to consult with a professional advisor to address your specific individual needs. Your use of any information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By listening further, you agree to identify and protect the AlphaWarrior Show and its associates from any claims or damages arising from your use of this broadcast content. Changes to this disclaimer may be made at any time and will be done effectively immediately upon posting or broadcasting. Thank you for tuning in, and we hope you find the episode both informative and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised.
Welcome to the next generation of warfare, psychological warfare. In modern conflict, the mind is a potent weapon. Discover General Michael T. Flynn's groundbreaking guide, A Citizen's Guide to Fifth Generation Warfare. Unlock tactics, strategies, and the mindset to navigate this cognitive battlefield that we all find ourselves in. Equip yourself against manipulation and emerge unscathed. Unleash your potential. Order now.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
I'm excited to announce our Christmas extravaganza is finally here. Get this season's flannel sheets for as low as $59.98. They won't last long, so get them while you can. Our famous My Slippers, they haven't been on sale for over a year. Regularly $119.98, now only $59.98. Our 6-piece towel sets are back in stock with extremely limited quantities, only $29.98. With hundreds of MyPillow products, there's something for everyone on your Christmas list. Bathrobes, duvets, quilts, down comforters, and so much more. So go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to save on all MyPillow products. For example, flannel sheets for as low as $59.98, or our 6-piece towel sets, just $29.98. But that's not all. I'm extending our 60-day money-back guarantee until March 1st of 2025. Plus, all orders over $75 or more ship absolutely free.
Are you worried about the effects that higher inflation rates will have on your investments? Are you trying to secure your retirement savings against losses, but you notice that inflation is a hot topic these days? But how dangerous are low inflation rates on your retirement savings? An inflation rate of 2% may not seem like much, but it means that prices will just about quintuple over the lifetime of the average American. And 4% average inflation rate means that something that costs $1 when they're born will cost $23 when they die. That demonstrates the danger of even low inflation rates. So when it comes to gold and inflation rates, many investors want to know whether inflation rates have an effect on gold prices. What history indicates is that over the long term, increased inflation should lead to correspondingly higher gold prices. From September 1971 to August 2020, gold grew 7.5 times as much as inflation. Not only can an investment in physical gold help protect your assets against the damage done by inflation, it can also help grow the value of your retirement portfolio over the long term. If you're looking to protect your retirement assets, why wait until stock markets crash and gold begins to rise in price?
Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh, and welcome to the Red Pill Project's Daily Dose, live with you every Monday through Thursday, 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and doing a simulcast here with the AlphaWarrior Show. AlphaWarrior, how are you doing tonight?
Doing outstanding, brother.
Fantastic. And tonight our guest is Patrick Byrne, the founder and former CEO of Overstock.com, a Marshall Scholar and a PhD in philosophy. Man, Patrick, you have an incredible story. I'm excited to have you on here. You have this new documentary and the book out with the Enemy Within docuseries, and I've watched some of it. Alpha's reading the book. I know the story from obviously being involved in podcasts and radio and investigative journalists over the last 8 years. You've had a really crazy life, man. How you doing?
Well, as they say out there in Hollywood, it reads better than it played. You know, as they say, it reads better than it played. It says it was a lot more fun in reading it than it was going through.
Well, very cool. So I want to just jump right in. You've had a very long relationship with the U.S. government, and a lot of things have happened. And that's kind of what this is talking about, is a small piece of this. But tell us how you got involved in that. Tell us what happened in your life that bring about those events.
How I first met Uncle Sam, so to speak, is I was a student in China in 83, 84. I was speaking Chinese by day. I had a French girlfriend, was speaking French at night. One day I was in a public area speaking French, and this little guy from Laos came up speaking perfect French and wanted to talk. And he would turn out to be a retired general who had once run a coup in Laos and taken the country and then been overthrown by the CIA. And he was living up in China and sort of had his own guerrilla army that they were supporting in Laos, fighting the Vietnamese. Anyway, so there was some story like that, but we became friends, got to know each other, had dinner a few times. And then eventually he asked me, this is 1983, the fall. He said, would you bring a letter? I'd like to get a letter to the US government. Do you think you could do that? And I thought about it a bit. I actually didn't give him a yes right then, but I thought of it a week and I went back and said, sure. So he gave me a letter that I took to the US government. And then, and this is spelled out in more detail in the book and in the movie, but so I thought about it a bit, and I just took it down to the embassy and asked for somebody intelligent and gave him the letter. And that was the last I knew of it for about 5 years. But then 5 years later, in 1988, a general reached out to me. The retiring general, chairman of the Joint Chiefs under Reagan, reached out to me and said that President Reagan had asked him as he was retiring, his last service to the country was to reestablish peaceful relationship with Vietnam. And he had made several trips, and his counterpart, the foreign minister, had asked him, would you be willing, if you Americans are serious, would you do something humanitarian for us? So Patrick, I'd like you to go to Vietnam, and there's no diplomatic relations, but the government will look after you, and spend a couple weeks and come back and write me a letter on how we can spend a few $100,000 to do the most good for the most Vietnamese people. So I did that. And when it was kind of natural. I spoke French, I spoke Chinese. I knew a lot about the Vietnam War. I was a bit of a buff on it. I was born in '62, so I missed it, but I paid a lot of attention to it. And I was studying development economics at Stanford. So there were a lot of reasons it kind of made sense. And anyway, so I did that. And then from then on, Uncle Sam knew that they could from time to time, and I did that. And it led to, I don't take any big credit, but it was 1 inch. I moved the ox cart of peace. And several years later, we developed peaceful relations again with Vietnam. And after that, Uncle Sam knew that from time to time, he could tap me on the shoulder, and especially on things that had to do opportunities for peace. He could ask me to step in and do something like that in different parts of the world. So that's really the basis of my relation. In the 05 to 09 period, I was used domestically to fight crime on Wall Street. And so that was sort of my crime fighting phase, where I was cooperating with the DOJ and the FBI at that point. But it's been more like a relationship with the National Security Council and people like that, and more like the thinker bees within the government, using me as an academic, or an academic would be willing to put on a backpack and go to kind of rough places and meet rough people. That's basically the nature of my relationship in general.
Gotcha. And then you get into Overstock. You start this company up and you have massive success. It takes a little while to get there, but you still get it to be successful. What was your relationship like with Uncle Sam during that point in time?
Well, actually, after 01, it heated up. After 01 and the 9/11, it heated up and it became quite like a second career. There were times it felt like Overstock was my part-time job. And so I've never been married and I don't have kids. And it's almost like this is what I did with my energies outside of work. Overstock was 80 hours a week, but outside of Overstock, this is what I did with my life, and got asked to go to strange places and meet strange people and not kill them, but actually befriend them. And there were times I even said once, and I think that the lines in the book, I asked somebody at the National Security Council, why do you guys ask me, don't you have people to do this? And he said, well, Patrick, in this world, before certain kinds of people talk, other kinds of people need to talk. You're that other kind of person. So those were the two things in my life. Rather than a career and a family, I had a career, and I had this second career trying to help out anywhere where there was generally some opportunity for peace. And that's when they knew they could call on me, and I would do these kinds of things for them. Gotcha.
Alpha?
So, kind of listen, you've had anything but a conventional life. The stories, just in the small parts that I've read, it's very intriguing. When you look back, to your young, life, young adulthood, you had a friend of your father's that kind of had this mentor role that a lot of people will recognize the name.
Yes.
If you tell us right now, how do you kind of feel all that kind of sets you up for everything that, Josh just brought up, these connections? Like, this man that was involved in your life is not just any man. Do you mind just sharing a little bit about that so people know what I'm talking about?
Sure. my family, my father, we were broke as a joke when I was born. He was Air Force ROTC and got out and went for a grad degree in math and was on the GI Bill, and he became an actuary, and then sort of moved my early years were him moving around to different jobs, moving his way up in insurance companies. He took a job in a broken car insurance company, and he was asked to, and that they couldn't find anyone to run it because it was going bankrupt. This is 1976, and he was there a few weeks and started making dramatic changes and thought it could be fixed. And he got a call that some fellow from Nebraska wanted to meet him. And he went down and met this guy, and he stayed out all night talking to him. And he'd never done anything like that in his life. He came back in the morning, we were having breakfast, and he said, "I've just met the smartest man I've ever met in my life." And we'd never had a new car, but we had to order in for our first new station wagon, $7,000. And he told my ma, "We're going to cancel this order, and we're going to put in an order for, we're going to buy stock in this guy's company." And that guy went out and bet a third of his net worth on my father's company. My father's company was Geico. People don't know this, but in the 70s, it almost went bankrupt. It was down to about 3,000 people, and it was almost out of business. And he stepped in, and he turned it around. And his new best friend forever, was Warren Buffett. But it was before anyone had ever heard of Warren Buffett. He'd never been in the paper. But Mr. Buffett started spending time with us and staying with us and really devoting a lot of time to me. It was really, looking back, it was extraordinarily generous. He spent a lot of time. He always made time for me when he would come to DC. He would schedule ahead. Now, I'm going to have 2 hours on Tuesday afternoon from 1 to 3. Make sure Patrick's home. And so we would spend a couple hours together every visit. And that ended up being this, I call him Rabbi. I started somewhere along the lines calling him Rabbi because we have the relationship that a young man would have with his rabbi. So he was really a great guiding force in my life. I ended up working for him for a couple of years and ran a group of 5 of his companies.
Yeah, and I asked that too, Josh, because when I'm reading the book, and I'm like, Warren Buffett, like, holy smokes. It just kind of set the stage for like Patrick's life was just not going to be ordinary. Right. You know, it would be ordinary for you, but it would be extraordinary by anybody else's measurement. And I know that when I look back at my life, especially like, you know, lessons from my father, experiences there, it's funny how things from when I was young have become very pivotal in the way I approach things now. And that's why I wanted everybody to understand that, Patrick, is the relationship, what you saw with your father, the decisions he made, and, you know, this kind of this mentorship with, you know, or rabbi relationship with Warren Buffett. How important has that been at some of these times in your life where it's like you're being called to do something that 99% of the world will never experience?
Well, it was pivotal. It was huge. And he taught me things in a dozen afternoons as a teenager that really formed my character. Although he told me, you know, Patrick, most people go through life trying to win the lottery once, and you won it twice the day you were born. You won the Connecticut state lottery in your dad, and you won the Irish sweepstakes in your mother. Really, I'm the youngest of 3 sons, and I'm much more a product, I would say, of my mother than my father. My 2 older brothers spent a lot of time with her. But so I was very close to her, and I had a lot of speech impediments and kind of learning. I learned things differently, and I had this very close relationship with her. And Buffett recognized that, but he also said the trick to life, you know, half of success is having the right heroes. And I had 2 unbelievable parents, and he pointed that out to me. And then I had him as a Dutch uncle. So I've had, just as I say in the book, I've had, in a way, so many tailwinds in life. It's not even funny. So by the time I was 16, my parents were millionaires. By the time I was in my 25, he was, you know, they were multi-millionaires. Even that $7,000 car, just that $7,000 car turned into Berkshire stock is worth $70 million today. So, I mean, it just all worked out for the Byrne family. But I guess it worked out so well. We always had a sense that the country had been far better to us than we had any expectation. But it meant that as I grew up, I saw society at all these different socioeconomic levels. So that was another interesting aspect to it. And Buffett is a very patriotic guy. Buffett, I've met a lot of billionaires along the way. You don't hear them. They are not a patriotic group in general. In fact, one of the things I learned is the higher you go up in the socioeconomic strata, in general, people sneer at patriotism, but not with Buffett. Buffett, when I turned 40, he said, Patrick, you've been alive now about 1/6 the length of the country, the lifespan of the country. What have you contributed and things like this. Never heard any other billionaire who talks that way. But he really does think in terms of, and my father was very patriotic. He's passed now, but he was very patriotic. And Buffett's always been a big part of his life, our relationship, to talk about the country and think about how to improve the country.
Well, let me get one more in here, Josh, just because you kind of answered one of the other things I wanted to ask you, Patrick. You have a great life. Like, the family's wealthy. You have a great mentor. You're flying to these places. You're having these great experiences. Because I've always wondered this about Trump, but I don't get to ask him, so I get to ask you. You have everything. You can be vacation, like you can do anything you want. How much did that weigh in your decision? Like when you finally started to have this relationship with the government to be like, I'm going to do this. Like you didn't have to. So, what kind of pushed you? I know you mentioned patriotism right now. Is that kind of where this stemmed from?
Yes, I think so. And it's funny you asked that. Gosh, you're asking better questions than people. You're asking good questions. The truth is, so you'll get a little bit later in my book, as you keep reading, you'll learn that as I got out of college, I was diagnosed with cancer. And I spent my 20s having cancer 3 times. And I spent basically 3 years in the hospital. And at this point, I've had 115 surgeries, and they've restarted my heart 400 times. So it's been a 40-year end of life situation. There was a point 10 years ago where I was stage 4 of 2 separate diseases at the same time. But I've been stage 4 of cancer twice back in my 20s. So, this is why I never really got married. You don't think in terms of having a family and building a family when you live like that. And no one's asked me that. I'm so glad I'm getting some. So I did very much think about in my 20s, I was in and out of the hospital for 3 years. And I was like basically in the hospital for 2.5 out of 3 years. And I couldn't hold a normal job. So I became a graduate student but I was like shuffling around campus as an invalid. I started off doing mathematical logic at Stanford. And I thought I would just do it for a year as I was convalescing. And then I won something called a Marshall Fellowship and went to England and started studying economics and moral philosophy, ended up back at Stanford to do the PhD. And I reacted quite negatively to what I call early woke. It's just when woke was arriving at Stanford. And I was really shocked. See, I had lived in China. I had experienced communism. I was shocked at how I was meeting these people who were really know-nothings, I felt. And they were just jettisoning constitutional principles without any idea of the history, of the thousands of years of history that had led to the evolution of these principles. And I reacted very much against them and shifted from mathematical logic to trying to really understand the intellectual history of the ideas behind our Constitution. I'd say that's what I did. And that became kind of my religion. So at one point I actually tried, enough time had gone by, I tried to enlist in the Army. I wanted to be an 11 Bravo. I might have been the only 11 Bravo with a PhD from Stanford. And I got rejected twice at the MEPS, at the Military Entrance Processing Station, one in Boston, one in Oakland. And then I turned 35 and there was no way to get in. But in my 40s, when the Gulf War got going, the whole GWOT, I actually tried to get special presidential permission to enlist again. And I was taken to the Pentagon. And while I was at the Pentagon, trying to get into the normal enlistment process, somebody tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, would you come talk to us?" And so another relationship developed. But I already had one relationship, but it just sort of compounded after 9/11.
This is fascinating.
I know. I was like, wow.
So we do things a little bit different. We just like to have conversations because I think that really kind of it engages everything, because you have to build a foundation in order to understand what has happened, right? And I think we're building a great foundation here of who Patrick Byrne really is. And looking at what Alpha was just saying, your response to that, when did it hit you? When was that moment that you started to see that there was this cyclic transition in government, that the government wasn't necessarily Uncle Sam, it wasn't this constitutional structure that you were trying to serve?
Hey, great questions. Well, I'd say it hit me twice. One was as CEO of Overstock, which was a public company, and I took it public. I came across different malfeasance on Wall Street. When you're a public company CEO, you're kind of out there in the mix, and you're out there with hedge funds and prime brokers and financial press, and you're just out there in the mix in a way. And it wasn't very long before people started, usually after they had gotten to meet me 2 or 3 times, they'd ask me out to dinner, and some billionaire hedge fund manager would lean over and in one way or another say, basically, hey, kid, we could make a lot of money together if you're willing to play ball. And I did what I thought anyone would do. I listened, and I put the pieces together, and then I took it to Uncle Sam. And I took it to all the people you would think you would go to explain, hey, are you aware that there's this mischief going on Wall Street, and people are doing this and that and the other thing? And I did that to the SEC and to the DOJ and to the New York Stock Exchange and to the NASDAQ and FINRA and to the House Financial Services Committee and the Senate Banking Committee and the Wall Street Press. And at the time, I thought the way the world worked was like something out of the Pelican Brief, which is where Julia Roberts figures out the evil corporation scheme. She writes up her term paper. She sends it to somebody. The DOJ swoops in. The FBI swoops in. I laugh. That's not how the world works. How the world works is that corruption is feeding a lot of mouths. And when you start to expose it, people are coming out of the woodwork with daggers drawn. And so from 04, 05, 06, 07, as I started exposing a bunch of stuff on Wall Street, I was shocked at these layers of government indolence. And so that's when I started thinking in terms of what economists call, like Milton Friedman called capture, regulatory capture, that society sets up regulators to protect us from certain industries. But what really happens is those regulators get captured and turned against society by those industries. But it isn't just the regulators. It's the regulators, it's the press, it's the Senate, it's the House, it's the DOJ, it's everything gets captured. It's the academia. They endow professorships for people to basically cover stuff up. So that was one way I really got turned. And another way, though, is that because of this long relationship that had existed, I'd kind of been loaned out to lots of different parts of the government, and I don't want to overstate. A lot of what I did was what I think of as academic. I'd be talking about things publicly. Some part of the government would call me in to go to a building in Quantico and come and give a PowerPoint on something I'd been talking about publicly, and then I'm escorted out, and that's it. Eventually, I was given a TS-SCI clearance because they wanted me to be able to brief me on things so I could help them. Barack Obama, and it was a great honor, Barack Obama in about 2011 promoted me to something called a designated national intelligence asset, of which I understand there were just like a few. And I was to be used only in real ace in the hole situations after that. But I have to say, in that first term of Obama, I started bumping my head on the deep state. There were certain things that were happening overseas that I saw that didn't make any sense. And now, of course, you get told, well, you don't know all the facts. If you knew everything that we know from up above, you'd understand why we can't do this or we're doing this other thing instead. But it didn't seem right. Some of it just opportunities missed, and opportunities taken that we probably shouldn't have taken, but opportunities missed that were really good opportunities. It just didn't really make much sense. It turns out I don't want to talk about that stuff publicly, other than I could say, it turns out some of it has been, I think I was bumping into maybe some things to do with Iran, and that, and I was sent to Iran once. I was sent to Iran, and in fact in 2006, but that was before Obama. But I always had these relationships over there, and I just started hearing and bumping into things that seemed a little odd, but I got told that you just don't get to know everything. And from where we sit and we have all the facts, we understand why this is the right decision. So those 2 times I started feeling like there was something amiss within our government, but I couldn't tell what, which leads us up to, if you want, what the movie addresses, and the book addresses. But I don't want to rush ahead. I'll leave it to you.
I mean, no, this is a great conversation. I'm loving this because we're getting to know Patrick Byrne, and I think that's truly important to kind of talk about what we're going to talk about next. So, talk to us what happens during this second Obama administration. After 2011, Hillary Clinton is obviously an important factor in a lot of this play as Secretary of State. We know now, with everything that has come out during that time, that there was a lot of malfeasance within the government, that the Barack Obama administration had massive amounts of scandals, that there was high corruption going on all over the place. But then 2014, something begins to transition. You have Obama, who's not going to be eligible for re-election. They're setting up the Hillary Clinton campaign 2016. You have what we know of now as the 16-year plan for the Democrats for the deep state. Take us through what happens with you during this time.
I will do so. And it comes in 4 chapters. The first chapter is, the official story is that the Russian collusion drama started in July of 2016. That's when Crossfire Hurricane started. That's a flat lie. It started in July of 2015. And there was a woman named Maria Butina, who they showed 1,000 times on television, who stood up and asked Donald Trump a question at a Vegas conference. That 3 days before that happened, I met her. And because I opened that conference, I was the keynote who opened that conference. And she came up to me afterwards and basically, she asked me to have lunch with her, and she told me, I've got a message for you from Russia. We sat and had this 90-minute conversation where I was invited to Russia. She also told me she was going to be a graduate student in DC, living with this big shot Republican guy, and was going to be spending her time. She wanted to be a citizen diplomat and was going to be trying to open back doors, back channels into the Hillary, Cruz, Rubio, or Trump campaign, so that whoever won, there would be a back door from Russia. Well, and she wanted to understand and get to know our foreign policy circles. Well, she didn't know anything about my relationships. And so I reported, 5 minutes into the conversation, I was mentally writing my report, which I got to Washington that night. And I later was told it was shot because of my background and my relations across all these branches of government. I'm told, that report was like a red flare over Washington, and everybody who needed to see it saw it that night. Which means 3 days later, when she stood up and asked Donald Trump that question in July of 2015, there were already feds all over her. That's when the whole thing started. And then they had me. So she wanted to get to know me better. And I could have opened doors for her into the think or be part of the government, and not the politicians, but the people who, I could have done that, but I wasn't going to do that till I got a green light from the FBI. And first, even a green light before I saw her again. And I wasn't going to go to Russia until they told me, yeah, go ahead and accept the invitation to Russia. That's when they started acting strange. For one thing, they normally would give a very decisive answer. They didn't give they were very wishy-washy about it. And believe me, on matters like this, Uncle Sam's normally very opinionated. He doesn't have any problem making you know his opinion. So that was funny. Secondly, when they gave me the green light, it immediately turned romantic. As soon as I saw her again, it turned romantic, and we began having an affair. That we agreed that we would see each other every month or two. I'd say, whenever you get bored of your Republican boyfriend, you pick a city. We'll meet, and I'll send you a plane ticket. We'll meet in the city. We'll have a weekend, a 3-day weekend together. I give great tryst. I've got no act 3, but I have a good act 1 and act 2, and we will just get to know each other, which also gave me a great chance to sort of keep an eye on her and learn what she was thinking and what she was doing, and let the guys know, thinking that I was sort of slowly convincing them that, hey, this is somebody who probably should talk to our foreign policy establishment and it would be okay. What happened was it got stranger and stranger. I realized what they were doing was they were deliberately setting her up. They were deliberately letting her setting up, especially Republicans, that they were letting her smudge up the Republican Party. I started thinking of it as a can-o scandal, that they were building a Russian scandal to put on a shelf, and someday they were going to take it off, shake it up, crack it open, and spray it all over the Republican Party. I could have told you in November of 2015 that's what they were doing. And this all officially didn't start until July of 2016. I knew in November 2015 that's what they were doing. Even to the point, for example, Chris Christie asked to see me. And he has to meet me. And they told me, bring Maria to the meeting and she'll report it back in Moscow. It'll make your stock go up in Moscow. So I went to see Chris Christie. I brought Maria. I went I had an hour meeting with him, and I brought her in for the last 5 or 10 minutes. So she just had 5 minutes of pleasantries with him. But that meant they used that to get a FISA warrant on Chris Christie. Well, multiply that by 10, and that's what they were doing, or 20. That's what they were doing with Maria. They were totally using her to smudge up the Republican Party and open up FISA warrants. But I, of course, didn't know that at the time. I thought I was doing what I told you I thought I was doing. So that's chapter 1 of 4. Any questions on that before we go on? You want to talk about that?
1,000.
Okay, let me grab a water, and you're going to think of 1,000 questions to ask.
While he steps away, Josh, as soon as he starts expressing the kind of the way they utilize Maria as this tool, as I'm listening to Patrick explain this part, it just immediately it brought validation to a thought that I have, where I'm like, listen, that is not done happening. You can put media people, podcasters into a company, into a cast, and you create this extension of, now we can get a FISA here, we can get a FISA there. I know it's happening on social media platforms where somebody drops into a space and all of a sudden now everybody that was on that microphone that had these, like Patrick said, 5 minutes of pleasantries, and now you can weaponize that technically a connection, and now all of a sudden people are on FISAs.
Yeah, there was a point she told me some big shots were trying to get her a meeting with Don Jr., and she was going to have a private hour secretly together somewhere to talk. And I assumed they would normally never let something like that happen. And I was like, what do you want me to do? I'll whisk her off to the Bahamas for the weekend. She'll miss the meeting. I won't get her back in time. What do you want? And they were like, no, just let it play. Really? They would never normally let. So that's when the penny started to drop for me, what they were up to.
Well, and it's interesting too, just because of the context of history during that time. We had the Obama administration, Newland over in Ukraine, the Maidan massacre that happened there. We know that was perpetuated by the CIA. Then we have Russia going into Crimea, and the relationship between the U.S. or the Obama administration and Russia during that time began to crumble really, really, really fast. And so I can understand in the context why they would look at someone like Maria and utilize her as an asset through proxy. But going into it, we can also see exactly what you said, the setting up for 2016. They were setting the stage, setting the narrative for basically Russia hoax, which we see come out after 2016. Now, with what was going on with Russia, we see this rhetoric of Hillary Clinton coming out talking about missile defense shields that are going to go up in Poland, going to go up in Ukraine. This is a few years after the Uranium One scandal that all occurred. We know that we're on the semi-verge of World War III with Hillary Clinton coming into office during this time. Now, during that time, were you aware of all of these scandals that were going on within the Obama administration as well? The Uranium One, what was going on in Ukraine? What were your thoughts about Maria in the sense of her relationships? Did you think that her relationships were completely just political, or did you think that she might have been someone with the FSB or something?
Oh, absolutely. The possibility that she was a spy crossed my mind within 2 minutes of talking to her. That this wasn't about, I knew, the funny part is, in a sense, I was the Red Sparrow. And I know I'm a lot taller and better looking when I stand on my wallet, but she's a real intellectual. She's an intellectual girl. And at the time I was in the magazine Wired as the messiah of Bitcoin. I was a big figure in the early days of Bitcoin. And do you know who Milton Friedman was by any chance? Dr. Milton Friedman was my friend. And when he died, he left me in charge of his foundation for 10 years. So to me, that was like Isaac Newton had called me and said, would you have my name for 10 years? In fact, Milton was supposed to lose the name, but a few weeks before he died, he called me to say, I want to make one last change in my will. I know the end is near, and I want you to carry on in my name for 10 years. That meant a lot to Maria. That meant a lot. That to 99% of humanity, that means nothing. But to 1% of humanity, that meant a lot, that Milton Friedman had given me his name for 10 years. So we had this very intellectual bond. She's a real bright gal. So I was aware of these scandals and the Hillary stuff, but that leads us to chapter 2, which concerns Hillary. Come Thanksgiving 2015, they told me, listen, don't worry about this Maria stuff for now. We got something more important for you to work on. The Bureau needs your help setting up Hillary Clinton for a bribe. And what's going on is there's two groups, Patrick, in the FBI looking at Hillary. And the first is the email group, and we all know that's a whitewash. But there's a group in New York looking into the Clinton finances, and they really want to put her ass in stir. And Director Comey has been preventing them from conducting a sting, saying there's not enough predicate acts. I mean, they explain the whole theory of stings, predicate acts and prior disposition and blah, blah, blah. There's not enough predicate acts, but information has come in that, anyway, I won't go into more. The details all in the book and the movie, but especially the book. But they have permission to set Hillary up in a sting, and they want your help. We believe the government of Azerbaijan wants to bribe Hillary Clinton. I actually learned that information myself. I've never been told you that or told people that, but the truth is that information came to me and so they through kind of a fluke, and they said, because I do have I'm over in Qatar right now, and I have all kinds of relationships in this part of the world, and they said, they said, what we want you to do, Patrick, is somewhere in the world there's going to be a room, and you're going to find the bagman from Azerbaijan, and you're going to make this happen. There's going to be a room somewhere in the world, and the bagman walks into the room, Hillary Clinton walks into the room, they spend 10 minutes alone, and then they leave. You've got 2 months to pull that together any way you want. And I said, well, okay, I'm going to be, bribing and breaking the law and stuff, right? And they're like, yeah, we got it. And I said, this is a rare, gentlemen, this is one of those rare missions for which I need something on paper, because you're asking me to get involved in a federal election and bribe a presidential candidate. So I think I should get a piece of paper. And they said, we've been told to tell you can't have a piece of paper, but if you go to Washington, D.C., the director says you can be shown a piece of paper. And I said, oh, so this is coming from the director. And 2 federal agents leaned in and said, and I said, the director and the president, and 2 federal agents leaned in and said, I said, well, you tell Director Comey and President Obama that from them is good enough for me, consider Hillary bribed. And 7 weeks later, on January 14th, 2016, Hillary Clinton accepted a bribe in a hotel room in Washington, D.C. from the bag man from Azerbaijan. I leave out, and I'm not going to tell the world how one goes about going to a place like Azerbaijan and demonstrating you're the kind of man who will do things like that and finds the bag man and works there. You can use your imagination on that. But 7 weeks later, it happened. If you want, I'll tell you the details of how I pulled it together. Or is that too much detail for you?
I am fascinated to know, Patrick, and Josh probably knows. So just real quick, Patrick, I was a gang detective. And so, I did undercover work in that, not long extended, undercover work, but nonetheless undercover work. And, a few moments ago when you were bringing up, predicates and,
I saw you nod.
Because you made a light go off because, it's a good tool when utilized for good reasons by good people in law enforcement. But the second I heard you mention it in this situation and going with Hillary, I was like, oh my God, that makes sense. And we're all going, maybe this is a conversation for another day, but one of the things I was telling people is if we rewind the clock back to January 6th and the arrests and certain narratives that are being put out there, MAGA or America First, domestic terrorists, I was telling everybody, look, the FBI just can't come out and just say, hey, you're a terrorist and you're this. Like, there's a criteria of things that need to fall in this matrix. But I told everybody, the fact that they're pushing it and they're doing all these things, and people are like, well, why aren't they arresting all the J6ers at once? I said, because you can arrest some of them in the beginning, get the charges that'll then have these, the way they were disposed of these cases. And now as the later ones happen, or if there was ever another January 6th similar type event, you could actually label this group like we would do in gangs. You could go and use these now predicate crimes because they have charges. There's a lot to it. Like Patrick said, there's a window of these crimes where one has to be before you can use the next one. And I told everybody they can weaponize this as a tool to actually create a terrorism group out of something like MAGA. So when I heard you saying that, man, I was just like, oh my gosh. And now we're at the part of the story where you're like, how does one go about this? I totally want to hear about it because people just, even after you tell the story, people will never truly understand like the anxiety around these moments. So please
in
share.
fact, even as they taught it to me, they said, as they taught me the theory, they said, an undercover cop can't just go up to a stranger on the street and say, hey, do you want to buy some cocaine? They can't do it because you can always say, well, later the prosecutor needs to be able to show that you were going to commit the crime anyway. And he does that by showing that the person committed one or more predicate acts. Like he pulled over at a corner known for drug distribution and he put it in park and he rolled down his window. These are all predicate acts so that when that undercover cop walks up and says, would you like to buy some cocaine? They can establish he already had a prior disposition to buy it. So it would have happened anyway and blah, blah, blah. Say, well, they taught me all this theory in 10 minutes. So what happened was she was in Washington, D.C. and I did not get face-to-face with her, but I arranged through money. I got somebody else face-to-face and who explained to her there was a foreign dignitary, and this other person didn't even know that I was using him, that who I was really working for. But they got a message to her that there was this guy from Azerbaijan wanted to meet with her and express his great respect for the Clintons, including that he wanted to make a large payment. And she said, you mean to my foundation? And I said, no, a private to a numbered account. So she agreed to the meeting. And on the 14th, she was on the 8th floor of a hotel. Her assistant was on the 5th floor. She had a limousine at 9 a.m. The bag man from Azerbaijan was brought in at 8:30 and brought up to the 5th floor assistance room. Hillary Clinton came out at 8:47 like she's going down to the lobby, gets in the elevator like she's going to the lobby. She gets off at the 5th floor, goes to her assistant's room. The assistant steps outside the door and stands and guards the door. Hillary's inside for 10 minutes alone with the bagman from Azerbaijan. And then at 9 o'clock, she's out. She's down in the lobby and in her limousine at 9:02. It's not in her schedule, but that's how it was done the morning of January 14th, 2016. So the more important thing, though, is what happened next. And what happened next is that I was told 3 days later I had to forget the whole thing. I had to forget it ever happened, because Patrick, it's been reanalyzed from the top, and we've realized Hillary's going to be president. Nothing's going to stop that. And when she's president, she's going to send her goons over to the FBI and look into everyone who investigated her. We're all going to be destroyed. Our bosses, our chain of command, and you too, Patrick. So you got to scrub every minute of this from your memory. And it didn't really sit. I said, yes, sir, but that didn't really sit well with me for a number of reasons. And a few weeks later, in the first third of February 2016, I got back together. And this time, and this is where the story gets interesting, there was a man there who was the personal liaison between James Comey and John Brennan, the director of the CIA. And that was funny because I never had anything to do with the CIA. That was always my red line. If I'm going to do this stuff for peace, I can't be out there snooping and doing other things. So my red line was I never had any involvement with the CIA. Here's this guy there from a personal representative of Brennan and Comey. And they said, I let them know it wasn't sitting right with me. And they finally let their hair down, so to speak. And the guy said, they realized they weren't going to fool me. And the guy said, Patrick, and this is word for word, said, what's really going on is this. And if you guys hear this, you'll understand the last decade in a way you haven't yet. Or, well, you probably have yet, but this will put meat on it. What's going on, Patrick, is this. At this point, President Obama has his people across the federal bureaucracy, but especially the Department of Justice. Hillary is going to be president for 8 years, and nothing is going to change that. But while she's president, think of there as being within the Department of Justice a Bunsen burner, like your high school chemistry class Bunsen burner, and the bribe information is going to be sitting on that Bunsen burner. The hand is going to be one of Barack Obama's people. If Hillary is a good girl, defends Obamacare, the flame stays low. If she's a bad girl and thinks for herself, it gets turned up. This way, Barack Obama, wait to hear the end. This way, Barack Obama is going to manage Hillary Clinton for 8 years. Then she's going to step down and Michelle's going to run. And Patrick, that's the plan.
Yep.
And I later learned that plan was called, and then he said, so when we tell you that you've got to scrub every moment of this from that memory of yours, we really mean it's a matter of life and, is how he put it.
Yeah.
And I said, okay. I later learned that plan was called Operation Snow Globe. Hillary was to be in a snow globe that Comey and Brennan and Obama owned. They could shake up any time. My bribe was the bait to lure her to step into the snow globe. That's the end of chapter 2.
Wow.
Questions?
Well, it was interesting because I'm sitting there going, well, this whole sting operation with Hillary Clinton just seems like some fresh dirt on her that they're going to utilize as pressure against her to get her to fall in line. But I find it interesting as well that he tells you with assurance Hillary Clinton is going to be president. There wasn't a doubt in his mind about it. And the Obama administration, or the Obama deep state, they knew this as well, almost as if they were planning to install her instead of having free and fair elections.
Oh, correct. Although, to be fair, at that point in history, in January, February 2016, Hillary was on a coronation tour. Everybody thought it was a done deal, especially because, people forget, the media who hates Trump so much forgets they created Trump. They gave Trump, some Harvard professor calculated, $4 billion of free time from the time he came down the escalator until he was the candidate. He was on CNN and Fox night after night, and MSNBC, all the stations he was on. They gave him $4 billion of airtime. That's because the establishment, the pro-Hillary establishment, wanted to have the most unappealing, the guy with the strongest negatives be the Republican candidate that they were sure Hillary could destroy. So they knew, or they were super confident they were very confident that Hillary was going to destroy him. However, it's also the case that they thought they had the election rigged. We were to learn later. But
it's interesting to hear the actual rationale why they pulled you back. Because as soon as you got to the part of the story where you're like, they're pulled it back, the first two things came to my mind. Either one, they wanted to keep this as, like shared mutual destruction. Like, you got something on us, now we have something on you. So there's self-preservation on both sides. Or the other thing that crossed my mind was somebody got wind that there was another investigation going on, and to disclose this one was going to expose something that was much bigger. But to hear that, they wanted to do, Operation Snow Globe as an element of control. I mean, it just, you want to talk about the 5D chess in the way this works. This is just insane.
Oh, it gets better. If you want to go on to chapter 3, let me know. 3 or 4, just say when.
Well, yeah. We're February 2016 right now, right? So
Right.
Take us to the next step. Take us to the next part.
Okay, the next step, if this were Hollywood, would be a flashback. Because the next step is what nobody knew, not my handlers, not nobody, was this. So when I had got in this quite famous fight with Wall Street in 05 to 08, which I said that I went to all the people in Washington you would go to, and they all turned out to be useless. I left something out, and that was the Senate Judiciary Committee. The Senate Judiciary Committee got their hooks in me, and it was led by a guy named Arlen Specter, who was a Democrat, a federal prosecutor from Pennsylvania, Democrat turned Republican turned Democrat, and he became a congressman and then a senator. And along that way, he went Democrat, then he went Republican, then he went Democrat. And I caught him there sort of around the last, no, he was still a Democrat. And they got their hooks in me, and they had me start getting to know them and bringing them all the information that I had put together that I had shown to the SEC, and they would do nothing about. And they got that I had stumbled over some really big criminal activity on Wall Street. And they said, for a year, they used me. The only time I've ever been a spy, frankly, was when I spied against the US government for them. They had me and directed me to move around the US government and report back to them, trying to figure out where the corruption was. And they explained to me, Patrick, we have a mandate to investigate corruption, which means our power transcends every power in government. Because when you investigate corruption, it means if we think that there's corruption in the manufacture of nuclear weapons, we look into it, and no one gets to tell the Senate Judiciary Committee, oh, you don't have the right clearance. We can look into anything that we want to look into in the United States of America. And so they handled me to move around the federal government. And they knew I already had all kinds of contacts and relationships. And that was a very strange period. And there's even a scene in the movie. The movie has a lot of, lines that's word for word out of what happened. Arlen Specter told me at one point, actually it was the time we met, the meeting we met, at the end, he was sizing me up. And we got to know each other. And at the end, he said, Patrick, when I was a federal prosecutor in Pennsylvania, psychologically, the hardest cases to prosecute were corruption cases, because you start feeling like an enemy of your own country because you're plotting against, they're your enemy. But it was and I didn't understand it, but he was sizing me up for an assignment, for a big assignment. So after they had me for about a year, this is the part that nobody knew. I got a phone call one day from a senator saying, come to Washington, come alone, don't even bring a lawyer. I go to the appointed time, and there's at least 7 senators in a room waiting for me. And they said, we stood around a table. They said, Patrick, we're going to show you something like you're never going to see anything like this in the rest of your life. And they said, we think you're right. There's some kind of corrupt force taking over Washington, D.C. And it's our job to stop. It's like it's a foreign nation some days, and on other days it's like it's domestic. We can't even figure out what it is, but it's taking over. and it's our job to stop it, but we can't stop it. And he went on, and I felt, as I said in the book, it felt like I had surfaced after a long swim underwater. I'd spent 18 months trying to convince people, hey, there's some real shenanigans going on Wall Street, and all the people you would think would do something about it are sitting on their hands. I don't understand this. And he went on, and so I finally said, sir, I know this is what I've been saying. How are you even going to stop something like this? And he goes, we're going to stop it because we have you, and you're going to stop it. And that's why you're here. We're going to be with the president tomorrow night, and we're going to show him this letter. But this is going to be sitting the rest of your life in a safe in Washington, D.C. And they told me this had not been done since World War II, when there was a concern about German influence, sympathizers within the government. And an American with a big Wall Street guy with a lot of contacts within government had been asked to become a German sympathizer and help flush them out. And they said, now, I read, and they had this letter I was not able even to touch. I had to put my hands behind my back and read this letter. And the letter was a page and a half. And by the way, this has all been confirmed. I mean, there are staffers who have confirmed to reporters, and it's mentioned in the movie that the staffers, as crazy as it sounds, there are staffers who've confirmed there is such a letter, this crazy letter about me in the Senate Judiciary files from 2006. And the first paragraph said something about their growing concern about, quote, systemic corruption infiltrating the federal institutions of our nation's government. And the second paragraph started with the words, the Senate Committee on the Judiciary requests that Patrick Byrne be shown extraordinary latitude under the laws of the United States of America to investigate and disrupt corruption within the government. Blah, blah, blah. I went on. And I was dumbfounded. And they said, no, look, this isn't a pardon. You can't go kill anybody. But short of that, it's going to make it really unlikely any prosecutor ever touches you, Patrick. Now, we get that you're a horse of a different color. We get that you're a little eccentric, but we love you. And it was the strangest conversation of my life. 7 senators around me, like all not. And they said, this is what you're going to do with your life. Your country, no one was asking me anything. They were not saying, would you be willing to do this? They said, we need you to do this, and this is what your country needs you to do. So this is what you're going to do with the rest of your life, Patrick. And we may not be senators when you finish. We might not even be alive when you finish. But this is what you're going to do with your life now. And so I'll end on this question. We flash forward, that was September of 2006. Flash forward almost precisely 10 years, 9.5 years. February 2016, I'm sitting with 3 federal agents. I have just over the last 8 months been used to set up to investigate a Russian girl, which has turned into basically seeing that they're using her to smudge up the Republican Party. I've been used to bribe Hillary Clinton for what turns out to be so they can blackmail her and hold her in a snow globe. And they've just threatened my life if I open my mouth about it. Does that count as systemic corruption infiltrating the federal institutions of our nation's government?
Oh, absolutely.
Sure. Yeah. Good, because I'm going to be telling this story to 12 Americans, good and true, someday. So I just want to be sure.
Yeah. Because
I decided to avail myself of extraordinary latitude under the laws of the United States of America. I decided that I was going to bide my time and wait for my kill shot. And then I was going to fuck John Brennan, James Comey, and Barack Obama the moment I got a kill shot. And I was going to derail this coup. Didn't know how. And what I said was, yes, sir, I understand. I promise I've scrubbed every moment of this from my memory. So that's chapter 3. Now you want to tell me, ask questions, then we'll go on to the 4th and final chapter.
So
you probably don't have any questions after that.
Well, it's interesting that you're telling this story in the sense of 2006 and what was happening. A lot of my research, I was active duty military, 2001 to 2010. I was stationed in Washington, D.C. At the Washington Navy Yard, Military District, Washington, from 2008 to the end of 2010.
Thank you for your service.
Appreciate it. And during that time, I joined a few different patriot groups. I was working with We Are Change. I was working with the Oath Keepers. We were having different events supporting Dr. Ron Paul, Congressman Ron Paul during the time for the 2008 election. And we were holding different events, and I got to meet a lot of different people. I got to meet congressmen, I got to meet senators, I got to meet generals and admirals, and I befriended a four-star admiral this time. And my inquiry was more about September 11th. What happened in September 11th? We were trying to bring about this truth. There's a few weird stories that happened during this time. I'm not going to get into it. It's just too long for this conversation. But this four-star admiral looks at me and says, you have to start looking at everything that you see on the news and the media when it happens with a military incident, a military accident, anything to do with nuclear weapons. Research and investigate that. It's not what you think it is. And we started diving deeper into various different incidences that were happening. There's different ones that happened in 2007, 2008, nuclear incidences. And the way that these incidences happened are impossible. Being someone in the military who's dealt with various different types of missile technology, onloads and offloads of various technology on U.S. Navy ships, the way that nuclear weapons are handled, there's a certain precedence that comes about from that. And
were you a Marine or in the Navy yourself?
I was in the Navy. He was a Marine.
Ah, well, okay. I know that Marines have a special role in that as well.
But one of the things I uncovered, actually just a few years ago, going back into the research, was that there was military incidences that were happening in 2006, 2007 that correlated to stolen military secrets. One of them being the Defense Logistics Agency in 2007, where 10 general officers were reprimanded and forced into early retirement. This was Mark 12 ICBM nuclear triggers that came from Minot, North Dakota. They were intaken in the Defense Logistics Agency in Utah by EG&G. They were mislabeled as helicopter batteries.
And did they end up in Pakistan?
They ended up in Taiwan on a boat heading over to China. And Taiwanese intelligence interdicted it. And that's how the scandal came about, and they got fired. But I was telling people, it's like the top general at the Defense Logistics Agency who would have oversaw the transference of classified information was a guy by the name of 3-star General Kevin Sullivan. Now, I find it interesting that he adopts 2 kids after he gets kicked out of the military. And one of those kids is Jaden X from January 6th, Jonathan Sullivan.
From Utah.
Yep. And so what we begin to see is that there was these stolen military secrets, and this got the attention of a lot of generals. It got the attention of the Senate Armed Services Committee, right? And what we begin to see with the Hillary Clinton emails, obviously later on, looking back into it, what Donald Trump did in his first 2 years, is that there was an exchange of military technologies that was going on with foreign countries. And this was one of the big reasons why they were, I believe, that the military was trying to investigate this and find this out, as well as what you just confirmed, that the Senate was seeing the exact same corruption and they were trying to figure out what was going on as well.
Interesting.
The two questions / comments that I have from hearing this chapter 3 part, because man, mind's blown. The first one is brass balls when you made the decision saying this is going to be the opportunity that I'm later on to, the kill shot to take these guys down for what they're doing. Hindsight's always 20/20. So knowing what you know now, when you look back to the moment you made that decision, do you think you truly understood the gravity of what you were taking on back then the way you do now?
No. My big mistake came over subsequent years because I successfully took the kill shot. My big mistake was keeping quiet about it, what happened, and trying to work within the system. And when I should have just come by 2018, just come public with everything. But I thought that, well, we'll get there. You'll understand why I didn't. I was later being told, look, everything's being worked out. Everything's been shared. You don't need to, please don't go public. We've got everything to the DOJ that needs to be blah, blah, blah. I guess what happened was I didn't get how total the corruption was. And so I still continued trying to play within the rules, thinking that there was some bottom to it, that there was some foundation that was not corrupt. It just turns out everything was corrupt. It's turtles all the way down. So you want me to tell you about chapter 4? It gets even crazier.
Let's do it. Let's rock and roll.
Where are we on your crazy meter? What percent of rated capacity of crazy are we on?
This is a Tom Clancy novel already. So
Absolutely.
So they came back in early July of 2016, and they said, we should not have had you break up with Maria before. What a mistake. You were right. There was something very unusual. We've opened a Russian investigation. Now, what's interesting, this was around July 5th. Trump became the nominee about July 27th, but by the July 5th of 2016, it was clear he was unstoppable. And they said, we want you to rekindle your romantic relationship with Maria Butina. Now, these men were very honorable, and I don't want to, that they themselves were horrified by this. They said, look, we've never heard of an assignment like this in our history. We don't do this in America. We're not like, but this is a highest national priority. It's going to be personally managed by James Comey and John Brennan. We will leave meetings with you and get on video conference with them. It's being done at the personal request of Barack Obama. We want you to get back inside Maria's head, get her pillow talk, and figure out what she's doing, what Russia's doing, what are they up to here. And I said, there's my kill shot. I'm going to set them up on rape and murder. I didn't say that aloud, though. What I said aloud was, it doesn't sound like hardship duty. Tell them I've got no problem with it. It took me about 2 months to get Maria to talk to me again because I'd been a real asshole when I broke off with her the first time. But after about 2 months, I got her to come out and visit me. And I wined her and dined her, and I told her, this time, Maria, we're going to do things in old-fashioned European courtship, where when you visit, you're going to stay in the guest room, not going to sleep with you. After 6 months, if you want to be mine, we'll get together, we'll be married, and only then will we sleep together again. And she thought this was very romantic. I reported to my handlers that we'd had a great weekend and fallen back in love and were physical again. I also I let them know that during that weekend, I had gotten her drunk, introduced her to marijuana, which wasn't true. She's a total straight arrow, but introduced her, I'm not, but she is, introduced her to weed, slipped her an extra powerful joint that knocked her out, and questioned her while she was knocked out and couldn't find any discrepancies. Now, as you know, Marine, that's kind of edgy to say in the United States. That's kind of edgy. Overseas, people get each other drunk, people do all kinds of things, but you don't do things like that in the United States. But this was important, and they wrote it down, and they left. And the next time I saw them, everything was cool. They reported to Brennan and Comey, everything was cool. So in that meeting, I dropped some further clues, and I didn't come out and say exactly, but I put these clues, but I had very carefully designed these clues that there was the day I didn't give a organized briefing. I did let's see, one day we went for a long drive, we went to a gun range, and another day I made this poached lobster dish, and then we had this conversation. But if you put all the clues together and tied it together, what I turned out to be saying was that on the third day she was there, we had done this, and I'd made her this romantic dinner, gotten her drunk, done the thing with the weed, questioned her, and then had sex with her. I knocked her out with drugs, questioned her so she was, I found no discrepancies, and then had sex with her. But I left that in sort of different clues and then left in kind of a hurry. But I knew it would take them 5 or 10 minutes to sort of double check and take, and what did he say about this? What was the night he did this? Was the same day he took the drive? But when you snapped it all together, what I was saying is that's what happened on the third day. Now, gentlemen, what is it when you get a woman drunk or inebriated and drugged and then have sex with her? What's the word for that?
That's rape.
That is rape.
That's rape. Hallelujah. Thank you. I was telling my handlers that I had drugged and raped this girl. Why did I do that?
Because they have, at least through the law enforcement thing, You have a felony that's committed that has to be investigated.
Let's see what Comey and Brennan are going to do with that.
Right.
I see the agents again a week or two later. There was hatred in their eyes. They thought they were dealing with a rapist. They didn't say a goddamn word to me. They were stone-faced about it, which tells us what?
They were going to let it pass.
Yep.
Comey and Brennan said, the way I imagine that conversation was Comey and Brennan said, agents, we don't give a good goddamn if Patrick Byrne drugged and raped Maria Butina. You let it slide. We got something more important to go on here. You're a smart guy, Alpha. You get it. I mean, you are too, Josh. But that said, I basically gave them a choice. Yep. And they said, you let it. We got more important things to do here. We're setting up this Russian hoax. You just don't ask Byrne a question, say a thing about it. So I let another meeting or two go by. And they said to me, listen, at one point, because I was real lovey-dovey in my letters with my emails or my texts with Maria, so they think I'm falling in love. And they say, the folks back east want to know, can you really do this without falling in love? And I say, you tell the folks back east that Nietzsche said that philosophers don't really fall in love. It would be like seeing delicate little hands on a cyclops. Imagine a monster with silly, delicate little hands, how silly that would be. You tell the folks back east, if they send word, I'll cut this chick's head off, bury her in the Utah desert, no one will know a thing. 3 federal agents jumped out of their seats into gunfighters' crouches, and one, I heard him click out of his holster, and then he put it back, and they stood over me, and they screamed in my face. They were like, hey, Byrne, let's be perfectly clear. We don't care what orders come from DC. If you harm a hair on Maria's head, we're going to kill you ourselves. You got me? I was like, yes, sir, I got you. No murdering Maria. I got it. But now I knew there was no way that was going to slide, that they had to report that.
Right.
That's going to be like a torpedo that goes all the way. Don't we, Josh, from the Navy, don't we have... I understand we have some weapon system where if there's a Russian sub off the coast, we fly up an airplane out and we drop a torpedo from a parachute and it splashes down and it pings and it swims around and homes in on it. I knew that there's no way the agents were going to let that slide. That was going to go to the depths of the deep state. And in the depths of the deep state, some demon was going to have to make a choice. Either we kill this mission and this crazy shit we're doing, or someone's going to have to sign off on the aggravated rape and possible murder of a girl that they knew was innocent.
Yeah.
2 weeks later, someone signed off on the aggravated rape so in spring of 2019, I walked in and laid everything out to the DOJ. Actually, in 2018, I got with Congress, I got with the Nunes committee and started trying to tell them this is going on in the summer. I said, what happened was I was watching Peter Strzok get grilled that day by those people. And then I saw that there'd been a number of people grilled, McCabe, I saw these different names over the previous few weeks that had all been grilled by Congress, and I saw how awful they were. And then I tuned in on what their positions were and their titles, and it suddenly clicked for me. After I had figured out what a bunch of bums these guys were, and then I tuned in on, I read about them and learned a bit more, and I realized, oh, this is my chain of command. Yep. This is the people who've been having me do this crazy shit back in 2015, 2016. I went right to Washington, D.C. I went to Nunes' committee. I found John Ratcliffe. I started explaining stuff to him. By April 2019, I'm in the DOJ explaining everything to them. 10 days later, they opened the Durham Commission. I was the predicate information to open the Durham Commission. In the summer of 2020, but then I was told, stay quiet, Byrne, stay quiet. And I stayed quiet for about 3 months. And my country was sort of burning. And I finally went out to see Buffett, and I explained to him what was going on. And he said, Patrick, you go public. And I said, if I go public, there are some prosecutors and other folks in Washington, D.C., whose heads are going to explode. And he said, Patrick, you let prosecutors do their job, you do your job. You're a U.S. citizen, your job is to come public. So that's why I went and I told the board of Overstock, listen, I'm going to be coming public about something, and I may have to leave the company. I gave them like 3 months notice or 2 months. I told them about 3 or 4 months before that I was involved in some bad stuff that may mean I had to leave the company. This reached the point I started to come public. As soon as I did, Wall Street started going crazy. So I just quit. And then I went on Fox. And there's this famous time I went on Fox and told just the first sliver of this story. And people couldn't process it. In the summer of 2020, the Durham Commission sent somebody out to see me to look at a bank statement from Azerbaijan in the second half of January 2016, a numbered account that had an $18 million deposit made. So the amount I said, in the country I said, in the week I said. So they found Hillary Clinton's bribe. And I said, and they confirmed to me it was Hillary Clinton's. And I said, well, what about the whole rape murder thing? And the agent, the federal, even had trouble, I could tell he even had trouble saying the words. He said, well, Mr. Byrne, after you after you insinuated that you had drugged and raped Maria Butina, the agents went back and said that you'd lost your mind and that the mission needed to be canceled. But they were overruled. And then after you proposed, I'll just never forget how he kind of stuttered. He couldn't quite say this. He goes, and then after you offered to murder Ms. Butina, they refused to continue the mission. I said, yeah, but it went on 5 more months. They had me date her 5 more months. And he said, yep, someone else took all responsibility. Wow. And I found out in late 2021, that was Barack Obama. Barack Obama signed a presidential finding, and I'm told this is the biggest secret in the US government, that there's focus groups figuring out how to spin this when it comes out. But guess what? You can't spin rape and murder. Barack Obama signed a presidential finding in October 2016, which happens to be the same month that Trump got in so much trouble for that, some locker room talk, as if, you know, we all haven't engaged, said something like that to another guy, or as if women don't talk that way. But anyway, I mean, not that it was admirable, but it, you know, whatever. That same month, Barack Obama signed a presidential finding instructing 3 federal agents to ignore their belief that I had drugged, raped, and might murder a girl so that we could continue setting up this whole soft coup. And I'm told that's the biggest secret in the U.S. government, that there's whole teams of people figuring out how to control this when it comes out someday. But it's out in this movie, it's out in the book, it's all explained in them. And Barack Obama, he doesn't look so well these days. He knows this isn't a best-selling book, it's in the movie. That's basically the climax of the movie. And it's all walked through in detail. And even just, you know, when I explained this all to the DOJ, they said, you understand, one of the people I was explaining to was the head of the National Security Division and his chief of staff, who was a female. She said, you know, Patrick, you're in a lot of trouble if Maria doesn't corroborate this. I said, I got no worries with that. Maria was sitting in a jail cell and knew I had something to do with it. But I knew Maria's a very special young woman, and I knew she would tell the truth. And they went and asked her in her jail cell the next day, and she said just what I knew she would say. Patrick was most perfect gentleman I ever met. I never met any gentleman. I did not know gentlemen like this still existed. No, that whole second period we saw each other, he never laid finger on me. He had me sleep in guest room, wouldn't touch me. I didn't understand. He took me in white tablecloth restaurants. He took me to fancy dinners, helicopter rides, wouldn't lay a finger, wouldn't even kiss me. I didn't understand the guy. Well, that's why I was setting up this whole thing so she would have a perfect memory, that whole second period, there was not one thing between us, and which she did have. And she, by the way, unbeknownst to me, when they made the movie, they got in touch with her, and she comes out for the last 4 minutes of the movie and confirms it. And she's really an extraordinary gal. She's forgiven me. She's making her own movie about things, but she acted it. She did a little statement at the end of my movie. So the big punchline is Barack Obama signed off on the rape and murder of a girl he knew was innocent, so that we could continue setting up a fake Russian scandal and we bribed Hillary Clinton so that he could have a leverage on a knife at Hillary's throat while she was president. And this was John Brennan, James Comey, and Barack Obama.
So,
mission accomplished? Is that a mission accomplished?
Yeah,
that's
absolutely.
a freaking grand slam. When you were talking about the part, the first one with where you make the story of the smoking weed, the drugging, and then the sex, which in turn by definition is rape under that context. When you do, so we have to take, so just so people know in law enforcement, you don't just get to have like assets or informants. Like you have to take formal trainings and be certified in these things because of all the liability that comes with it. And so
I saw you wince as I was telling you that. Like if you had an asset who did this and was telling you that, I saw you.
The second you said it, I was just like, I already know exactly what these guys did because now it's COIA. It's cover your ass. You're going to your management and you're saying, listen, I'm done. Because if you don't take proactive measures to end it at that point, then you own it. Like you own it. And in something like this, because this is a much more higher gravity than anything that I was ever a part of, you're not just going to rely on words. You're going to do a situation report that's provided because you're like, here's my CYA. We can seal it. We can put it in a skiff, whatever. But here's me notifying you that this is done. And then you get to the murder part. And especially when you said the way they reacted, I was like, no, they're done. Those guys are done at that point.
Well, it's a great point.
Your face was just like their face. Your face was just like their face. Like you looked like you were going to kill me. That's just what they looked like. And I knew there was no way it was going to slide. I knew enough about the federal government. They were going to go back and they were going to all be writing reports and saying, this is not on me.
But it also has a paper trail of documentation. And I think that's one of the other genius parts that you did is that you knew that this was confidential in a sense. But saying these types of things, these agents are going to want to cover their ass. So they're going to document everything. And then even that, McCabe and Rosenstein and Comey, when they hear this, they're going to want to cover their asses. And so it's going to have a trail of documentation all the way up, especially if they're not the top level of approval.
That's why I thought of it. I was thinking of it like that torpedo, that it was going to go through the deep state until it found the right guy who had the authority to put his name on that. And now you have, in 2006, the Senate Judiciary Committee asked me to find the deep state. Well, now you've got the deep state. Find out who put their signature on that letter. Well, it turned out it was Barack Obama.
Wow.
Now, and I like Barack Obama. I liked him until he misused me. I didn't vote for him, but I had no problems when he was elected president. I've taken the first president I did something for was Ronald Reagan. And it's always been a matter of great pride. No one knew in my life, but that this was a big part of my life, that I took these assignments, and especially when one was a presidential assignment. And so I risked my life on several occasions for Barack Obama that I describe in the book. There's I'll tell you this, the core media team of ISIS, the guys who do the movies, pilots burning in cages, they have a selfie of them standing with me in a jean jacket, arms around each other, taken in a slum in the south of Giza, Egypt on Christmas Day, 2012. So I've risked my life, and that was on a presidential tasking from Barack Obama. So I've risked my life for Barack Obama. But when I got pulled into this other stuff, I guess he thought my loyalty was to him rather than to. Now, did I analyze this correct? You guys like
yeah.
The Constitution, right?
So one of the things that I look at is I love history. I'm a buff of American history. I love the Constitution. So anytime that there's history being made, I'm always researching and investigating it. Going back to the 2016 election, these people steal elections and they make sure that they win when they steal these elections. How did Hillary lose?
Trump overwhelmed the algorithm. They were prepared for They were prepared for him to win. They were prepared for him to maybe win big. He won bigger than they were even prepared for.
So too big to rig in 2016.
Too big to rig. And that's kind of what happened this time. Well, something disrupted. They had a rig. I'm not going to go into too much detail. They had a rig planned. They have 15 different cheating techniques. They had 15 different cheating techniques. I'll put it this way. After I spent 2 years doing the America Project with General Flynn as my director and helping spawn this nationwide movement. And that's really, I gave away almost all my fortune, frankly, in the first 2 years after the fake election in 2020 to every constitutional sheriff's group, every election integrity group, Frederick Douglass Society, getting blacks to return to their correct party, their home party, the Republican Party, every group of moms standing up against LGBT ideology. And I was like the angel money and the venture capital money that funded 100 of these groups around the country to get this movement going. And General Flynn knows movement warfare and knows about movements. And it's all. But then I went overseas, and I've been overseas for 2 months. And I might as well say what I've been doing is I've been hunting that story on Venezuela. And I've put together the entire story, and this really is all Venezuelan mafia, which is the Venezuelan government. And Venezuela is where mafia turns into nation state. The government is the mafia. In fact, it's called the Cartel de los Soles, Cartel of the Suns, in reference to the generals don't have stars, they have suns. So the capos of the cartel are the generalissimos of the army. The mafia is the government. And they came to power under Hugo Chavez in 99, and they seized two things: the oil industry, because that's where the money is. It's the biggest oil reserves in the world. And they have since looted $4 trillion while their own people starve and cannibalize each other, literally. They seize $4 trillion. But how do you keep yourself from being dislodged? You seize the election industry and the election council. That election council created a type of software or technology package that you could rig elections on. They commercialized it. Their commercial front is a company called Smartmatic. And then Smartmatic, their package, became the core of all the systems of all the main election systems in the world. I won't get in trouble by mentioning any brands, but those brands are really just name tags on what is really Smartmatic technology. So that's taken over the world. And that's what I spent the last 2 years on. And they had a plan to rig this election. And basically what they do is, this is my hotel room key and this is my bottle cap. If the plan is to have bottle cap beat hotel room key, they've got 14 different techniques on the ground of how you cheat. And it's all the ones we know about and some people don't know about, but of like getting illegals registered to vote, then stuffing the ballots in their names. The illegals don't have to vote. They just have to get registered to vote, and then they stuff ballots. There's 14 different things like that. But at the end of the day, they have in Serbia an office where they, at 7:01 p.m. when the polls shut down, they get on the computer, they see how much is left, and then they just jam it. And the way they do that is they create, there's a back door into every county that use their equipment has a back door. They come in from Serbia through a VPN, and they create within that county's election management system, a virtual machine. And a virtualization is you create like a virtual machine in the RAM, not on a hard drive, but it's in the software in the RAM of a machine. So there's like some virtualization is something that came around in the last 2 decades. And you're creating sort of a second computer within the computer. And it operates like it's got its own hard drive and everything, but it's really all just software and RAM, memory. They manipulate whatever results they want. They can make that hard drive sing hallelujah if they want. They can do anything. Then they just collapse the virtual machine and they withdraw the connection. You ain't going to find a trace of nothing. You can audit that. You can audit all the software. You're not going to find anything. Only if you do a forensic audit and take an image of the hard drive and go through the bits and bytes, you're going to find even there you won't find much because it all happens in the RAM, but you're going to find this is what happened. Do you know about the Tina Peters case in Colorado? This is why they lost their mind, because she got a forensic image and of the hard drive that was used, and a computer science professor studied it and said, gee, something very strange happened in this middle of this election, where they created a new database, they wiped out the old one, they did this and that, but I don't see how they did it. There must be some hidden script. Well, I've learned how they did it, and this has been a 2-year, basically a private espionage effort, where we got all the people, we got everything figured out, and even how they did this in the office they did this from in Serbia. But they planned on doing this election night out of Serbia, but something seems to have disrupted their plans.
Now, do you think that they tried to do that in 2016 out of Ukraine?
I think they've been doing it out of Serbia, an office out of Serbia that has Serbian military intelligence and Chinese military intelligence running on Huawei machines. So they're actually running our elections out of Serbia in 30% of the counties of the US. And there's an institute in China that studies, in Xi'an, China, that studies every by the way, every county in America, they have an expert in. I come from Grantham County, New Hampshire, and I'm sure they've got a guy who knows Grantham County better than I do. And they've started, here's the other thing, they've been doing it for 20 years. They've started off at the ground up. So it's been school boards, it's been mayors and police chiefs, it's been prosecutors. And if the country seems like it's changed in this weird way that we don't understand, that's because they've been doing this from the ground up through Congress and Senator and finally the presidency. The truth is, I'll tell you more than I've told anyone yet, if you want. They rigged the primary of '08 for Barack Obama against Hillary. They didn't rig the presidential election, but they rigged the primary of '08 in Iowa. And if you go back and look at the news, in '08, he had the surprise victory in Iowa, and that's what really launched him. They also rigged 2012 against Mitt Romney, but they got overwhelmed in 2016, and they planned to do it again and they did it in 2020, and they planned. Oh, by the way, they're doing it on off-year cycles. They're doing it with Congress. If you go back to 2018 in Orange County, California, they suddenly elected, which is typically, as you know, a very red place. They suddenly elected 3 AOC types. That was all rigged. It's all rigged.
Yeah.
By the way, I have all the proof of this.
I lived in Adams County, Colorado, during that time, 2018, and this is when I was really getting into this. And everybody on the county was red. 2018 all turned to blue overnight, and nobody could figure out what the hell happened. I think we all knew what happened. But that's what they were doing, and it's gave them immense amounts of power. But now the tides are turning, aren't they?
And I'll even tell you, I've been keep biting my tongue on some things, but I guess it doesn't matter. There's a Newsweek story about how Venezuela has a $25 million bounty on my head. This is why they figured I was actually thrown out of one country. I won't tell you which country, but I set up let's say a cyber operation to go after Venezuela. And back about a year and a half ago, I was thrown out of one country where they said, and a very professional cyber operation and multinational hackers in different places. I'm very well known in the blockchain community, so it was very easy to find hackers and put together something and pay for it under the table to go up against Venezuela. And I was thrown out of one country, and the prime minister, one day I got a call from the lobby of the hotel. The personal attorney of the prime minister was in the lobby, and he came and he wanted to meet me, and he came up, and I said, "What's up?" He said, "Mr. Byrne, the government has become aware of what you're really doing in our nation, and we're not going to arrest you because we think you might be right, but you can't do this from our soil. And you have 24 hours to leave or we will arrest you. And the prime minister wants me to tell you that our analysis is that you are conducting 4 or 5 major international felonies. And the government of Venezuela is going to take the position that you personally have conducted an act of war against them." And that was 18 months ago. They're really angry now because their election didn't go as they expected. And July 28th of this year didn't go quite as they expected. And they seem to, they were down 80-20. But their system was they knew they were going to have 7 million votes against them and 2 million for them, but they were just going to stuff 5.5 million votes. Well, then they have a system that they can stuff ballots with. It seems to have broken on them on election day. And they apparently think I know something about this. And about 2 weeks later, they came out and they've put a $25 million bounty on my head.
Oh, God.
I got some fun stories, but they don't get nowhere near the ballpark of a country coming after you.
They don't.
Before we get too far from it, Patrick, I want to ask you a question. So back to when you gave them that first disclosure, which just had to do with like the drugs and the sex, the personnel that was debriefing you then, was that the same personnel present for the next one, or was it new people or?
No, it was the same personnel. But what I found out later was they went back and were like, Byrne's lost his mind. We should pull the plug on all of this. And they're at least 2 of them are real patriots. 2 of them were real happy when Trump got elected. And I think they're real patriots. I think that we all found ourselves, we were over our heads. We all discovered on the same day how we were being misused and stuff. At least 2 of them, and maybe all 3. I don't know. And it was hard. The third was harder to read. He may have been part of this or may not.
I can imagine what your position is. It's hard to get your bearing in that situation because like I put myself in their position. And if you have a case that, you as the officer believes that this is a legitimate investigation that's going to get us the bad guys we really want, then you still got to maintain this facade because whoever you're speaking with, that relationship and rapport is extremely important. So you can't really communicate how much you're disappointed in this because it can destroy that. And that can just end the case because these things take, like you said, it takes a very long time to establish these relationships because, it's all psychological operation on all sides of it, so just to understand, like, when they got ready to break leather on you, that alone is just like, okay, we got to recover from this, but we got to protect ourselves. And this, like, I don't think people really understand how many dynamics are taking place in that.
And that's why they couldn't react spontaneously. As I was giving them the information, they couldn't react spontaneously. I knew their training was going to be to listen, to be very poker faced, and then after I left to take their notes and say, wait a second, when did he say this? And then he said this other thing happened on the day he did this, and he had to staple it all together, and that they were not going to be able to react spontaneously. So I kind of used that to my advantage. I feel awful for those fellows. I heard it really hurt their career. Sorry, gentlemen. On the other hand, our relationship wasn't so good for my career. I had to throw away 20 years' work and leave Overstock to go public about all this. Yeah. Some days I wish what I had done was write it all up. I had an email list at Overstock with 50 million names. I could have just sent it out to 50 million people. And that may have been, however, that would have destroyed Overstock. There was evidence that they were already trying to destroy Overstock while I was there. Yeah. Because they had figured out that I was not on board anymore.
So, Patrick.
Sir.
It's 2024. It's coming to the end of November. Donald Trump has just won the November 5th election. We are on the brink of World War III. We have inauguration in 60 days from today. Or 59 days from today. What do you think is going to happen over the next 6 months? What are your thoughts?
Well, first, I want to, if we make it to the inauguration, I want a truth and reconciliation process. I don't want a bunch of people hung from trees. I may be the only guy on my side of the table who, actually, I hear Trump is saying truth and reconciliation too. It's what Mandela did after apartheid. You can't, if you try to hang 10,000 people, you're going to have a civil war. Right. So we have truth and reconciliation. Or you at least give that a try. The truth all has to come out. Secondly, the other issue is before we get to that issue, is do we make it 60 days? Clearly, Biden can't even spell attack him, so he doesn't know this. These decisions are, and Kamala, I heard that Kamala went on vacation in Hawaii we're about to start World War III, and she's gone to Hawaii. This is Obama and the people behind Obama. They've waited 100 years for this moment.
Yeah.
And I think, Obama's a narcissist, and narcissists are all about the image they present to the world. And then shrinks will tell you that a narcissist's biggest fear is public exposure. And I think and now he understands he's going to be exposed. He is being exposed to the world through the movie, the book, through 100 things, through 100 podcasts like this. And I think he'd rather burn the world down in World War III than let this all come out. And so they're trying to provoke. We're absolutely in the wrong on this Ukraine thing. I grew up, as I explained, this general who sent me to Vietnam, Jack Vesey, Reagan's chairman of the Joint Chiefs. He's a Hawks. He was a Hawks hawk. He's dead now, but he's a Hawks hawk. And yet no one could ever accuse him of being a softie. But he said in 2015, he took me to see Schultz and Kissinger speak, and they all agreed that it's crazy to start World War III over Ukraine, and it's crazy to talk about bringing Ukraine into NATO. That if we do, then we're putting our tanks 240 miles from Moscow. That's extraordinarily provocative. Russia's been invaded 4 times from the West in the last 2 centuries. And if that's a way to guarantee a war, instead Ukraine should be like Finland and Sweden and Switzerland, they said. And these were hawks. No one could say that George Shultz or Jack Vesey were softies. Yet for some reason, since 2014, we have had Obama and Clinton and Biden and Victoria Nuland, war pig. They've been just absolutely adamant that we have to get Ukraine into NATO, that we have to pick a war or start World War III over Ukraine. Doesn't make any sense. I was in Ukraine 6 years ago, and I was dealing with what I thought were some legitimate businesses that turned out to be mafia. And they explained to me, look, Patrick, there's 3 mafias in Ukraine, and there's no way you do business here without being with one of us. And we got to know each other for a week. And at the end of the week, they said, we have a letter we'd like you to take to Trump. Well, that's the way that foreign intelligence services entrap you. So I said, I refused. I wish I had not. I wish I'd said, meet me in Paris and I'll take it from you. But I said at the time, look, I can't take that letter. I don't know Trump. I'm not with our government and why don't you just take it to our embassy, fellas? And they said, we can't. Your embassy now this is 2018. Mm-hmm. They said, your embassy is a bunch of Obama, Biden holdovers, and they're in bed with one of our rival mafias. We have 2 rival mafias, and they're in bed with one of them, and they're super corrupt. Last year, your government gave $5 billion through the embassy. $4 billion of it was stolen, and it's being shared among the mafia and your embassy people and the Obama, Biden, Clinton crew. So I think, Ukraine is super corrupt. I think America, where we have our hand in Ukraine, is super corrupt. I think somewhere between 60 to 90% of the aid we have sent there for this war has been stolen. Yep. I think that's probably feeding a lot of mouths in Congress. And I think people would, and then there's the whole question of 45 bioweapons labs, that Hunter Biden owns 10% of. What the hell's that about?
Yep, metabiotic.
So whatever our real reasons for being in Ukraine are, I suspect they have to do with corruption and not for whatever nonsense they're selling the public through the New York Times. And we should not be starting World War III out of it. And Putin, I think, has shown, he's conducted the war like Russia does. It's a meat grinder, and he's not, he's a monster, I guess, but he didn't start this. He offered many times before the war and after the war started, he offered, look, just agree Ukraine doesn't go to NATO for 20 years and it can be neutral, and that's fine. And there was even a deal struck between Zelensky and Putin that was initialed by both 2 or 3 weeks into the war. And it was us and Boris Johnson from the UK who went and told Zelensky, don't you dare stop this. And we're paying Zelensky. Zelensky bought a $40 million mansion in Miami last I heard. I hear he's got properties all over the world now.
Well, yeah. Ukraine is one of the money laundering centers for the U.S. bureaucracy and the deep state, as well as the place that they go and conduct secretive research, whether it's the 45 or 30, 40, 50 biolabs that are out there, or the various nuclear research that happened after 2014, after they did the coup attempt and took over Zaporozhye and then also took over Chernobyl, which they had old World War II compounds underneath those complexes. And so, yeah, and then you have the IMF and the World Bank, the loans that go there to the Fox Ukrainian banks, that once they issue these loans to Ukraine, those banks go under and that money gets distributed to NGOs, NPOs, so forth. And then that gets redistributed to the global establishment so they can run their clandestine operations. So it's really this kind of money head center for the international global order, as I call them, to distribute money. And if you take out that keystone place right there, now they have to reconfigure everything, and it's going to take years to rebuild it.
I think there may be a plan. They don't care if they destroy Ukraine. They want it reduced to rubble. BlackRock has been given some $1 trillion contract to rebuild it, and it's going to end up as the capital of the world. It's going to be where the UN, the WEF, the WHO. It's going to be, the plan of Klaus Schwab is to collapse the nation state system. And there'll be some Central European headquarters emerge as the capital of the world. And I've always thought it was German, but it may not be German. It may be Ukraine. They don't care if they're reducing it to rubble.
Well, it might be one of the reasons for the warfare and allotting the warfare and for the U.S. and NATO funding of it is to allow that to happen. We know the IMF just approved 8 months ago a $40 billion reconstruction bill loan directly to Ukraine. BlackRock and the Clinton Global Initiative are ones that actually got a piece of that to help rebuild Ukraine. So you're absolutely right on that. And what I meant by in the sense of destroying Ukraine, that they're not going to let that go, is in this context, it's the structure that's there. It's the political organizational structure that goes there. It's the control over Ukraine. That's why it was so important to get Nuland in there to install the next Ukrainian organization, Poroshenko, that came in to get rid of Yanovich, who was with the Kremlin, who wanted to restart trade with Putin. It was so important for them to eject Russia in 2011, 2012, 2013, get the United States back in control to really garner that control over it, as well as put pressure onto Russia, because we know that there was a portion of the deep state that was trying to instigate World War III in 2016. You're a critical part of this in the sense of what we just talked about. They were setting up Russia and they were setting up Republicans. And many of us believe that 2016 was supposed to be the beginning of it. Hillary Clinton's rhetoric previous to the election, talking about the military defense shields, and Putin leaving the nuclear proliferation treaty in 2016 with the U.S. starting to rebuild nukes all over again. So we knew that conflict was on the verge, but Donald Trump won and it all stopped at that point in time.
I think that when the Soviet Union fell, I had an epiphany, because I was raised by hawks. I was hawkish. But boy, if there was ever a time for us to reach out and do something positive, and we had a program to help them disassemble nukes, and it was about $45 million a year. Now, for my entire lifetime, we built nukes. Trillions of dollars. Americans don't know. We have built trillions of dollars worth of nukes on the justification of they have these nukes and, we have to spend all this money. Well, then this opportunity came to dismantle them. And all we had to do was spend $45 million a year. And we were dismantling nukes. And after 2 or 3 years of that, they said, we can't find the $45 million anymore. Which made me start thinking, you know what, maybe it never had anything to do with their nukes. There's just so much money awash in this system, in military industrial complex. But I think that this isn't, the military industrial complex is feeding and growing fat off this war. But I don't think it's limited to there. I think there are some grander strategic plans which are to collapse the USA, collapse the southern border, collapse Western Europe. And there'll be this new world with sort of one central nation and the rest of us. And I don't know where you stand on the pandemic, but I guess I would assume you guys feel like I do about it, that we're kind of up against some people who don't care if they collapse 95% of the world's population.
So, Patrick, one of the probably the best quotes from my show that I say almost every day, and I've been saying it for 4 years, is they will scorch this earth before they ever give up power to Donald Trump again. And I think that that's the truth. And that's why we are here right now with on the brink of nuclear war. And they will progress this to that next point. And hopefully, I believe that Putin, as much as all governments are terrorists, right? Putin, as much as a dictator as he is, I think that he has some type of moral fortitude to where if NATO strikes, if Ukraine strikes some strategic assets in Russia, hits nuclear depots, energy infrastructure, these types of things, Russia's going to go tit for tat. They're not going to engage, even though the rhetoric has been played that they will engage NATO nations to supply these missiles. I think Putin is playing them with optics. He's baiting NATO. He's baiting the West in hopes that they do strike. They do a preemptive strike, because then he's going to play the diplomatic card, immediately go to the UN Security Council, and then you'll have China, other BRICS nations rise up and say, what the hell are the West doing bombing Russia, a sovereign nation who never attacked them? And that'll be an immediate ceasefire at that point in time, which will take us into January 20th, which means that no World War III actually breaks out. I think that would be probably one of the best things that Putin could do, understanding that Trump is coming in.
Inshallah. Well, I, from your lips to God's ear. From your lips to God's ear, but this is terribly reckless. And what we really have are some, I used to think of everything in the terms you're describing and what's their angle and who's making money off it and this and that. Maybe it's been because in the last 4 years, I'm not a big part of the Christian community. I was raised Catholic. To me, being Catholic was like being Marine. You are your whole life, but I always thought of it like boot camp, that you were supposed to sort of, as a kid, you go through those classes and stuff, and then you get off. So I haven't gone to church in 40 years. But I've been around the Christian community, and there have been people who've been telling me, Patrick, some people are just demons. And you're trying to say where the angle is and where's the profit. And they may be in it for that. But at the end of the day, there's some people who are just demons. And in particular, these narcissists who are about to be exposed, their greatest fear is public exposure. And they understand that this is the end of a 100-year project for them if they get exposed. So maybe they just want to scorch the earth rather than have, have you noticed sometimes, Buffett says sometimes crooks just look like crooks. Look at Barack Obama now. Barack Obama is like the painting of Dorian Gray, where the painting has all the sins of the. He just doesn't look like the guy.
He doesn't look healthy.
He looks gray, and he looks unhappy and angry and evil, and it's like he can't suppress it anymore, I guess.
100%. I have a question, Patrick. So one, when I look back on my career, and I remember the first time, and I'm going to purposely be vague here because it's still going on. When I remember I got wind of a person that was, what we say is they're on paper with us. Some people say informant, some will say asset, but they're on paper with us. But the level of what this person was at, I was like, then why don't we just take the entire structure down already? Like we could do this. And for me, it's just one of those questions where it's like, then why is this being allowed to continue? Maybe there's something more, your rank and file guys, your gunslingers, your crime fighters, but then you start to realize maybe there is an evil that exists that just wants the evil to continue on, which brings me to the question. I've asked myself this, Josh has probably asked himself, you've had exposure into so much more than I can ever fathom. Is the system that we have right now, is it even fixable? Or does it just have to be completely dismantled and started over?
Well, it is fixable. It is fixable, and there's no dismantling it. There's collapse or not collapse. And if it collapses, 90% of us die through supply chain collapse. This was all modeled out in 2005 in national security. They modeled out an Ebola virus hitting America. And they discovered that it didn't take nearly as many cases as you would think before things unravel. And then they did it again with financial collapse and EMP. And they just discover, food, fuel, and pharmaceuticals. The supply chains, we're connected in our complex society by invisible supply chains.
Yep.
Food, the average food an American eats has been trucked 1,500 miles. There's only 30 days of fuel there's 30 days of pharmaceuticals in the supply chain. Without supply chains running, in 30 days, your diabetics start dying. 50% of the people over 50 are walking around with conditions that in the absence of medications, you're dead in a year or you're dead in 6 months. And so if this starts unraveling, it takes somewhere between 3 days and 2 weeks for us to go through a tipping point that we don't tip back out of. Once the fuel stops flowing, or if electricity goes down, electricity is in every gas station pumping these electric pumps, which pump the diesel fuel. So then the trucks stop running. The trucks stop running within 3 days. There's only 3 days of food in the cities. There's 9 meals at the tip of the supply chain. So after 9 meals, the kids are crying, and people do a lot of funny things when their kids are crying and hungry. And we go through tipping points that we don't tip back out of. It becomes a Walking Dead kind of world. In fact, this is my great fear. China's plan is that we go through that and then we collapse and devour ourselves. The cartels are given 3 years to rape, pillage, loot, and burn. And when there's nothing left but a husk, China occupies and we become new China. 80% of the groundwater in China is contaminated. Yep. Their plan is what I just told you, to drop us into civil war. And when we collapse, the cartels get 3 years to rape, pillage, loot, and burn everything they want. Then they withdraw. Your home in America already has a deed issued on it in China. There's some colonel or general or CCP guy who he thinks he owns your home. And he gets up on Google Earth. He looks at it once a month. He thanks you, Josh, for that new hot tub you put in your backyard. And their original plan was 1949 to 2049. In 2010, it was a 100-year marathon, they called it. In 2010, they accelerated it from 2049 to 2030 as their goal. After the election of 2020, they started saying it's going to be 2028, maybe 2027. So they think they're there. And that's also why we have to stay peaceful. We have to stay peaceful because if we fight, the China wins. If we fight each other, it turns into, we very quickly rocket into Walking Dead kind of scenario. And China will be taking your hot tub by 2028, maybe 2027.
Let me get some hope to this real quick. It's the smallest scale you can probably ever fathom, but it was something important that I witnessed. This was about a year, and no, probably about 3 years now. It was right when, Twitter Spaces, when it first started, X Spaces now. But I was in this space, so it was probably just under about 300 people. And it was conservative versus liberal, and it was hot and heavy. I mean, everybody in there was just at each other's throats, like what we see in our country when it comes to like the geopolitics. But then a foreign dude came in, and he started to rag and diss on America, and everybody instantly focused on him, and everybody was defending America. They weren't defending America left. They weren't defending America right. They were just defending America. And I remember when I stepped back and I looked at it, I was like, wow, this discussion was as hot as it can be. But the second someone on the outside came after this country, nobody cared about red and blue. It was just America. And like I said, I know it's a small scale, but I think it is representative of probably a variable that China or any adversary just can't measure, that if we are conscious enough to recognize that there's a foreign adversary that wants to destroy us, I think that is powerful enough to make everybody kind of drop down political titles. And I think that exists in this country still.
From your lips to God's ear, but I can tell you the Tren de Aragua, which is this violent gang from Venezuela, which is now in all the major cities, Atlanta, Chicago, New York, LA, Denver, their orders are, when the order comes, they are to align with Hispanic and Black mafias and fight the white mafias, the Sicilian mafias, and try to get that to happen, and then it blossoms into a general race war. That's
so
what
then, Patrick, let me say this to you, because you probably know the people that need to hear this if they don't know it already. Because gangs was my thing, and I was very successful in it. I did it for 14 years. Even have awards from FBI, signed by Comey. Not proud of who signed it, but I definitely earned it. But one thing we knew at the rank and file of gangs was, and that I know now, like other gang detectives don't know this because you learn this after the fact, right? Is you learn that the prison gangs, because the prison gangs rule the street gangs, and then the ones that don't rule the street gangs are controlled by the cartels. So those are the two factions that ultimately control all the gangs in our country.
So wait a second. The prison gangs rule the street gangs, except for the street gangs that are controlled by the cartel. They're not ruled by prison gangs. They're ruled by cartel.
Yeah, they're ruled by cartel, and there's fewer of those, but they have more for like Mata Salvatrucha or MS-13. Right towards the tail end of my career, I'm in Southern California. Some of my, we would call them our street rats. They said, "Hey, man, there's these new guys that are coming in, and for whatever reason, the main guys, they used to call them the key holders. They're afraid of these guys." And I'd never heard of MS-13, so I started looking into them and immediately got pulled off of that. And hindsight's 2020. I can imagine why now. But these guys did have the backing of the cartels. So now street gangs will work, though, like the trafficking still comes from the cartels, but ultimately the ones that are controlled like the Mexican mafia, the street gangs that they control, if they put out, a certain rule, the street gangs are going to obey that, regardless of what's coming in from the cartel orders. Now, but the thing is we have the intel to remove those leaderships. And I've never understood, okay, yeah, we have them in the shoe programs. We have these people removed. But if we, especially in this digital age, if we can control these things, we could literally shut down street gangs in America in a week. It's really not that hard. But we don't. Now, here's the thing to go. What you're saying is once that order comes out, the street gangs and stuff like that, they're going to facilitate that. Now, and I know this will sound controversial. Most people are going to be like, Alpha, you've lost your damn mind. I'm not saying street gangs aren't violent. They're extremely violent, extremely reprehensible. But the vast majority of them still operate under a code.
Of course.
There's still a street code because, that barrio or ghetto or hood is still there. That's their sanctuary. That's their land. No one else can come into it. If there was a way, there is a way, if it's just done to where our intelligence communities could reveal, hey, your Mexican mafia leader guy is really working for this CIA guy. Your Sueña gang, Familia, they're working for, if the gangs recognize that the people that are actually controlling them are controlled by the institutions that they call the man and don't agree with, it would create it would be turmoil, which is dangerous, but it would create a challenge to, well, who's really going to be in charge of this gang? Because if the street gangs realize that these orders for chaos that are coming are so that your actual barrio and ghetto are going to be taken from you in the long run, they wouldn't align with that. And I know people are probably like, you're crazy. Just, I hate to say trust me, because that's one of the things.
I believe you.
But there's this relationship that exists in that world that can actually be weaponized in our favor. And the intelligence communities know who the people are that are leading this. They're the ones running that.
They're the ones running that. So Patrick, I don't know if you knew this. When I was in the Navy, I did counter narcotics in the South Pacific. I was a member of the Visit Board Search and Seizure team on my ship, and we operated with the Coast Guard LEDET, law enforcement detachments. We went down to South America and we would catch drug runners or human traffickers coming over, dropping drugs off from Colombia, Venezuela, Peru, taking it into Central America, and then they would traffic it up. We were dropping off like $20 million of cocaine in Mayport, Florida. And we had DEA in there, CIA in there, and we're doing the offload. And I'm sitting there talking because I was the guy in charge of helping the offload and getting it all into this unmarked semi-truck. And I said, what do you guys do with all this cocaine? And they said, well, honestly, 2.5% will be distributed onto the streets for intelligence on the streets. Another 2.5% will be burned and destroyed. And the other 95% is going to go back to the Colombian government, and they're going to pay us money, which is going to fund our operation. And they utilize that for intelligence, and then they put another few bales on another ship, and they catch that, they interdict that, and they keep the money flowing into the military industrial complex. They keep the money flowing into the intelligence industrial complex, and they keep the drug trade and the human trafficking trade going on, because that is funding all of this ancillary operations on the side.
Yeah, well, intelligence is a work of, as someone explained to me once, like imagine two demons meeting each other in the dark and making a deal. It's like they think no one is in the dark, no one else is ever going to see. They're just two demons, no one's ever going to know. Imagine the kind of deals that will get made. Well, that's what intelligence is about. Listen, folks, where I am, it's go. On 3 a.m. I'm gonna squirt.
Patrick, appreciate you. Thank you so much for your time tonight. Any within docuseries.com will get the link out to everybody so they can go out there and check this out, the Patrick Byrne story. I love it. Patrick, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you, Alpha. You can also just go to patrickbyrnemovie.com and it will get you to the right place. Thank you, gentlemen, very much.
Patrick, as you sign off, let me ask you one last thing,
Sure.
and you can get back to us in the future, but I know she would wring my neck if I didn't ask you. There's a woman on X. She goes by the name of Colonel Towner. She used to work for the Pentagon, brilliant woman, but she's brought this Operation Gladio thing to the surface on something that a lot of people said was old, but a lot of things seem to be operating under that. When you have some chance, find this woman. If you can follow her work on X, and when we speak again, I would definitely love your take on what you think about it.
Operation Gladio. Her name was Colonel.
Her name is Colonel Towner.
Towner. Okay, I'll look her up right now. Thank you both, gentlemen. It's been a pleasure.
Good night, everybody. Take care.
Science proves that a healthy immune system is the body's first defense against the smallest of ailments to the most catastrophic. Coriolus versicolor is the most sought-after, all-natural supplement for both humans and pets to help boost the immune system. There are over 400 studies worldwide on its effectiveness in humans, including Sloan Kettering Cancer Center, MD Anderson Cancer Center, and now from the University of Pennsylvania School of Veterinary Medicine. Together, we can help reverse this terrible tide now plaguing your loved ones and give them the immune-boosting supplements that they need.
Because of your overwhelming support, our $14.88 MyPillow has been one of the biggest sales in MyPillow history. I couldn't think of a better way to say thank you than to extend our wholesale pricing through Christmas. Get a classic standard MyPillow for only $14.88. Upgrade to a queen size, just $18.88. King size, only $1 more. Get my body pillows for only $29.88. And ready? Multi-use MyPillows, only $9.88. It's perfect time to stock up for Christmas gifts for everyone on your list. Go to MyPillow.com or call the number on your screen. Use your promo code to take advantage of our wholesale pricing, including my classic standard MyPillows, only $14.88. But that's not all. I'm so confident you're going to love our classic MyPillows that I'm going to extend my 60-day money-back guarantee until March 1st, 2025. Plus, orders over $75 ship absolutely free.